All right, Gaza War sit rep. We're on day, we're on eight, the date is April 19th, 2025. I don't count, I don't count days of the war anymore. We're just going to give you dates. It's April 19th, 2025. And this is going to feel a lot more like one of the older sit reps from when the war was raging because the war is raging now. We have active fronts. The ground war in Gaza is very much back on, and I'll start there. The Israelis are now fighting in Gaza, and they are now getting blown up and ambushed and taking casualties in Gaza, which is what happens when they fight on the ground in Gaza. So three D9s targeted with Yasin 105 and a Shawath explosive device south of Khan Yunis. There's east of Gaza City. There's a field report of from the resistance targeting a Merkava 4 and a D9 armored bulldozer east of Gaza City. Then there was a difficult security incident, and you may have seen the helicopter, the famous medical evacuation helicopter. And the text of this report was the resistance targeted a Hummer Jeep of Army officers that arrived today at Al Muntar Hill, east of Al Tufa and Shujaiya neighborhoods with a Cornet missile and rained mortar shells down on the area as the soldiers were being evacuated. A high ranking officer was reportedly killed and four soldiers were injured, two of whom were in critical condition. So the ground war in Gaza is back on. I do not believe that the Israeli army is in a condition to continue this for very long, which is also why this whole war, and especially this phase of the war, is an experiment in maximum cowardice warfare. I don't know if that's a technical term, but that is the term. They are trying to use extermination without ground troops, or they're trying to presumably use ground troops to mop up after bombing and starvation have done the task of extermination. That is their strategy. They're bombing people's tents. They're raising more and more territory to the ground, Razing, and trying to expand the zone of total destruction. And they are facing no constraints except the resistance. So you can simplify your analysis to that extent. And because that is, the Israelis certainly have done so. They don't have any concern for international law, Western public opinion, domestic public opinion. They are only constrained by the casualties they're taking on the ground and by the external attacks from Yemen and the economic blockade by Yemen. And as I mentioned, the existence of resistance groups that can continue to have potential to resist them, notably Lebanon. And I'll come back to Lebanon in a minute or two or five. So I'll if I get back to this, I'll talk about it a little bit about can they do this? And nobody knows. It is an open question whether a genocidal Western power can succeed in a campaign of extermination without being willing to, without winning a ground war, and whether they can do it solely by aerial bombardment and siege in the presence, in the complete, with a major weapon in their arsenal being their complete impunity. I You guys may have seen that the International Court of Justice, I almost feel like scoffing as I say those words, but the ICJ, whatever you want it to, whatever you think it should really stand for, has said that they're going to give Israel 6 more months to commit genocide before they have to come back and answer to whatever is left of the court and whatever is left of the planet Earth at that point, the international system. I guess the one thing I say, I made a tweet mocking them, but there's one thing I should say, which is this disgrace that I saw that we've all seen today from the ICJ is what I expected them to do in the first place 18 months ago. I expected more of something like this the first time this happened. I did not expect them to order the provisional measures and the additional provisional measures that they did. I expected them to do something like this. And so they have returned to their predictable function and doing what I expected they were here to do, which is tear up the international system and the soft power of the West so that Israel can continue its campaign of mass murder forever. So, international law is that's where international law is. It's a total mockery. And I don't really think we need to talk about it or spend any more time on it. I don't really ever want to hear about it again, although um, nobody cares, obviously, what I think or what I want to hear. Um, Abu Obaida made a statement. That's the spokesman for Qassam brigades, the armed wing of Hamas. Abu Obaida mentioned that this American Israeli prisoner, Eden Alexander, his fate is unknown. He had said before that his fate was unknown after Israeli bombing and that the resistance had come to the conclusion that the Israelis are trying to kill these prisoners. They are trying to get intelligence on the whereabouts of the prisoners and target them and kill them. There's a dozen or more Israeli military people who are prisoner in the Gaza Strip alive. There are several dozen that are probably dead. And Eden Alexander had left a video message saying, I feel like I've been abandoned and that the government wants me dead. And I suppose they then perhaps the Israelis managed to actually kill him after that. So that's the Gaza front. I expect that there will be more of that, much more of that in the between now and the next time, the next sit rep in a week, that there will be a lot more of these incidents, difficult security incidents, ambushes, Yasin 105 attacks on armored vehicles and tanks, attacks on dismounted soldiers. If the Israelis are in those areas, they will be struck, they will be taking casualties, and they will be hit continuously. So that's the Gaza front, and it will continue like that as we go forward. So the West Bank, Tulkarm and Jenin, I saw reports from both of those. Tulkarm is on the 82nd continuous day of Israeli invasion. Jenin, the 89th day. Usually there was over the past year and a half, there's been a kind of raid nature to the Israeli presence. They would attack and stay for a few days or leave the same day. And they're continuously they've raided these northern West Bank towns for 82 days in a row until Tulkarm, 89 days in a row in Jenin. So that is a fairly continuous pressure. And I mean, when we talk about the immense pressure that the Israelis are putting on the West Bank, we should, it's probably it's probably, one shouldn't forget that this is also pressure on the Israelis. The Israelis are trying to keep a tempo of policing and army operations in the West Bank, which is ultimately at least as important to them and their whole project as Gaza is. And they're continuously they're on the continuous offensive there, continuously harassing people, taking homes, driving their armored tanks, and they do come under attack there. Their settlers are there. It's a bigger territory, much bigger than Gaza. Many towns. They have a wall, they have all kinds of infrastructure of control, but there are vulnerabilities, and I don't think that the future there is certain, and I don't think that everything is certain to go their way on that front at all. But for now, it certainly is. For now, they are committing a lot of destruction and a lot of death and a lot of misery and a lot of displacement in the West Bank. Okay, Yemen is a big deal, and on the Yemen front, they had today's Saturday. They had their massive march yesterday, and at their massive march, it appears that Yahya Sarri, their military spokesman, was there. He spoke there. He announced that the they had taken down another MQ-9 drone, one of these $30 million drones, the 21st drone that the Yemenis have taken down from the Americans. These drones, I think, are really important. I had a question. I had wondered why they keep sending them. If the Yemenis clearly know how to take them down, but I think the answer is they don't have any human intelligence. They don't have a lot of target acquisition. They're trying to locate high profile leaders. That's what they really want to do, is they want to kill Abdul Malik al-Houthi. They want to kill Yahya Sarri. They want to kill these leaders and show give some satisfaction to their bloodlust and their urges to see people who have names and faces that the resistance or the people can relate to. They want to kill those people. That is the Israeli urge, the Zionist urge, and the American urge is to assassination and murder and bloodlust. And they're trying to fulfill that. And to do that, they need intelligence. And the MQ-9s are one of their only means of intelligence, which is why they keep sending them, even though the Yemenis are able to shoot them down with quite a lot of regularity now. 21 of them over the course of the war. The Americans are also massively bombing infrastructure and civilians. They killed 58 I think, yes, just in the last day, bombing Hodeidah and Sana'a, 58, and wounded 126. And as always, those numbers usually go up. These are the initial numbers. So mass murder, civilian murder, and massacre as they lose military equipment and operate without any kind of intelligence at all. The speech from the Yemen spokesman included a couple of really good quotable quotes in terms of the statement. One of them, first, I'll just quote it now. First, the American military buildup and the continuation of the aggression against our country will only lead to more attacks, targeting, clashes, and confrontations. It will only push Yemen with its noble people and faithful leadership to more steadfastness and perseverance in its supportive stance towards the oppressed Palestinian people. Second, the enemy will reap nothing from escalating its aggression against our country except disappointment, failure, and defeat. Its recently arrived aircraft carrier will not achieve what 5 previous carriers, which the armed forces successfully confronted, pursued, and forced to leave, failed to achieve. Third, free and independent Yemen will not back down from continuing its support operations for the Palestinian people until the Israeli aggression on Gaza stops and the siege is lifted. They also announced that the new carrier, the Vinson, was targeted for the first time. So Yemen is very much still in the battle and announced that they are not going anywhere in terms of this battle until their objectives are achieved. And their objectives are not just an end to the aggression, but they have always been an end to the siege. And they have said that, and they have fulfilled that. So in Lebanon, the Israelis are killing civilians. They did a drone strike on a car, but there was a statement by a Hezbollah and who said that no one will be disarming us. And there was a speech by the Secretary General Naim Qassem yesterday, April 18th. And a couple of important things that Naim Qassem said. The resistance shouldn't be blamed for the costs or losses, but praised for preventing Israel from achieving its aims. This is a really important point that Naim Qassem makes, that this is the look what you made me do nature of the Israeli psychological warfare. They're the ones murdering, they're the ones killing children, they're the ones committing the sexual violence. And what they do is they want you to accept that as a fact of nature, while the choice to resist is the one that's the moral question. Because if you resist all of these atrocities which they're committing, they want to portray as automatic consequences of resistance. And so, therefore, the people that suffer are supposed to blame the resistance and not the people that are actually committing the crime, not the people who are actually committing the genocide. And that is one of the most vile things that they do. And it's one of the most vile things that you can fall for. If you fall for it, it is one of the most vile things to fall for. So please don't. And Naim Qassem is trying to remind you of what they're doing there. Israel has no excuse post-agreement, but continues daily assaults. They've counted 2,700 violations of the ceasefire in Lebanon. Naim Qassem says that Israel wants to occupy most of Lebanon and annex it to occupied Palestine. Israel's talk about disarming the resistance is a cover for weakening and occupying Lebanon as part of its expansionist project. Naim Qassem says, we are in the phase of diplomacy, but this window is not open indefinitely. Israel calls for the disarmament of the resistance, and he says, do you expect us to be rendered powerless so Israel can freely invade? That will never happen. Those who think we are weak are delusional. Who said we would be patient with Israel long enough for it to achieve even a fraction of its goals? Our stance is built on resistance. The primary issue in Lebanon is the expulsion of the Israeli occupation. We have options. We fear nothing. Forcible disarmament will not happen. We will not surrender. We are not weak. We are not intimidated by threats from America or Israel. We are the people of confrontation. We will not allow anyone to disarm the resistance. This idea must be erased from the dictionary. And the same goes for the, I don't know if this came and went in between the last time I talked to you, but there was if it did, in case it did, the Israelis took to the Egyptians a new proposal for a ceasefire on top of the previous one that they broke. The notion that Hamas is supposed to fully disarm in exchange for food, a truce or something, after which obviously the Israelis will continue their genocide and have nobody to even stop them or deter them. So Hamas said no to that. But there's also some kind of level of offense that the Egyptians would even have presented that as mediators, the Egyptian mediators. And it isn't to the Egyptians' credit, although there's plenty to talk about that is not to the Egyptians' credit in this whole scenario, in this whole war. But the other kind of detailed thing that Naim Qassem said is he said this ceasefire agreement is strictly limited to the area south of the Litani River. This is stated 5 times. And if let Israel withdraw and stop its aggression, and then we can initiate discussions on the national defense strategy. So, there's a whole bunch of details about the future of Hezbollah, the potential integration of Hezbollah into the Lebanese army, and all of that is, Hezbollah's position is that's all an internal matter because Hezbollah exists as a resistance organization to resist Israel. So if Israel were out of the picture, then, you could talk about Hezbollah folding up shop and becoming a political party and becoming a kind of just a regular party in Lebanon that does politics and reconstruction and debates economic policy. But while Israel is trying to exterminate all the peoples of the region, Hezbollah exists as a resistance organization, and armed resistance, is their first priority. So I wouldn't, if you're going to listen to Naeem Qassem and the spokespeople of Hezbollah, I wouldn't get too stressed out about discussions that they have on an ongoing basis about what happens to Hezbollah after Israel fully withdraws and isn't really in the picture as an imminent threat to Lebanon, because that is a different world. We're talking about a very different world if that were to happen. And in this world, Hezbollah is not going to be disarming. So what else do we have to talk about? Syria, massacres, ethnic cleansing, normalization with Israel, all along the lines that we've always known that there would be. And it is unfolding more or less exactly as we would have expected. What I want to just return to this theme of, oh, actually, Iran. We should talk a bit about Iran. There's another week of negotiations today. Apparently, they were talking. I haven't seen anything come out of it. Let me do a search here to see if anything happens. Oh, very good progress. Design a framework for a nuclear deal. They moved to expert level talks. Okay, so it looks like they're going to they concluded in Rome with very good progress. Talks will continue next week. 4 hours, second round of talks. They agreed to meet again. So held in a constructive atmosphere, moving forward. We must be very cautious, but there's no reason for much pessimism either. And then I think Israel said they're going to bomb Iran unilaterally, which I don't know what they're talking about. They there's no bombing Iran unilaterally by Israel. Israel is a speck compared to Iran, and it's a very distant speck. So there's no they either are going to be bombing with either American planes and American pilots and an American logistics with some Israeli flags on some of the planes, or not. But there's no such thing as, people should not think that there's such a thing as a Israeli war with Iran that doesn't involve America. So, um, what a so that's I'm a little surprised, but I don't know. I still think there's going to be a war on Iran. I don't know. It it does seem like the way these talks are going, there's been some level of I don't know, military realism or cooler heads on the American side prevailing. But but I think ultimately Israel gets what they want, and so we'll have to see how that goes. If Israel wants this war, then Israel will get this war, I think. So let me get back to this. Let me just get back to the actual situation with the war on Gaza and the genocide in Gaza, and just really the strategic logic on April 19th, 2025 is the Israelis are dripping in their ground forces and they're taking casualties, and their army is in really bad shape. The condition of their army was what led to the ceasefire in January of 2025. And it wasn't Trump's initiative. Trump, as we could see from what's followed, is not some kind of independent creature at all. He's just another tool in the genocidal arsenal of the joint U.S.-Israeli ruling dispensation. So the condition of the Israeli military and the army in particular, and their inability to do anything to the resistance in Gaza, the Palestinian resistance in Gaza, and the Palestinian resistance in Gaza, and their ability to inflict casualties on the Israeli military, the Israeli army, was what led to the ceasefire. And the now 60 days of starvation and the bombing of people in tents and the expansion of the dead zone. The goal is to just make the entire Gaza, the whole of Gaza, a dead zone, to starve everybody in front of the whole world and bomb everybody, and then the army can just go in as a mop up kind of operation. And I don't know if that is possible. I really don't know. It's never, as far as I know, it's never been done before. So we are in unprecedented territory historically. I also don't know what will happen to the world if this happens. I don't know what Egypt thinks is going to happen next, or what Jordan thinks is going to happen next, or what Saudi thinks is going to happen next. If once this stage is over, I assume if they meekly allow this to happen, they will then meekly allow Israel to do the same thing to them. It only makes sense. If you get out of, Julian Assange once said something like this: once you get out of the habit of fighting for others, you're not going to be able to fight for yourself when your time comes. So, I don't know what kind of dystopia awaits if this is allowed to happen. But I also don't know if it's physically and logistically possible. I suspect, given the depravity of Western society and the power that the U.S. still holds in the world, and the ability to produce the bombs and get the bombs to where they need to go, and our inability to disrupt that process, that it's they're seriously considering that's their plan. So uh it's really hard to offer a prediction. I just think that we can read into what they've done so far, the intention to keep doing what they're doing. It's not a hard, it's not a stretch to assume that what they're trying to achieve is what they're saying they're trying to achieve and what they're actually trying to achieve on the ground. It's it's a it's a more it's more of a stretch to try to assume that they're doing something else, to assume that they've got some other plan other than the one that seems to be unfolding. The resistance side is trying to do what they've also always done, which is to survive. If they can survive and maintain resistance, a core of resistance to that can continue to inflict casualties and inflict costs onto the genociders, then the the battle is still on. And those are the that's the nature of the attrition. And now there's less of everything on both sides than in 2023. Israeli society is losing people. The Israeli economy, as people say, does not exist anymore. The Israeli economy is just purely an engine for taking US resources and using them to murder Palestinians. There is no other project, there's nothing else going on in Israel. The Israeli people are producing soldiers and pilots to murder Palestinian children. That is the product of Israeli society, and that is ultimately the product of the American industrial base. The tariff war isn't working, and so the American industrial might is basically to design weapons to murder civilians from afar somewhere in the Arab world and possibly in the near future in Iran. So the Israelis are losing a lot. Their society, their economy, their cohesion, their trade, their reputation. Western soft power is gone. International law is finished. All of these consequences will play out for a long time, over many years. But all of these blows have been struck and they are irreversible. And on the resistance side, hundreds of thousands of people have been killed. Those people, we will never get them back. And Gaza has been destroyed. It could be rebuilt. It could be made habitable again. It could be rebuilt better than it was. But the people that the Israelis have murdered will never be brought back. The people they've killed in Gaza and in Lebanon and West Bank and the people the Americans have killed in Yemen, not just over the past 2 years, but over the previous 9 years. So attrition, it is a war of attrition, and you can see how much attrition has been happening. And it is impossible to know. All we can do is track it. I can't say where this is going to end or what's going to be left at the end. Between now and next week, I think it's pretty safe to say the war will rage in Gaza and in Yemen. There will probably be some surprises in both of those fronts. Given the nature of the talks and the promise of more talks next week, I don't think the war with Iran will start between now and April 26th. So I also don't think that a hot war in Lebanon will start between now and next week. Although I don't think it's bluster on Naim Qasim's part to say our patience isn't infinite and if you think we're weak, we're delusional. I think both of those things are true. I don't think those things are bluffs. So I do think there's a possibility that a hot war will start again in Lebanon. I do think there's a possibility of war on Iran, but probably neither of those are going to happen this week. So until then, you know, if you have money, the fundraisers are there, the Samir Project, Gaza Municipality, all of those. If you can support legal defense or any other kinds of actions for people like Palestine Action or anyone else that's doing that kind of work. Yeah, hang in there. I'll see you in the next one.